Today we're going to read from Aliens Ate My Homework, Chapter 3, Seldom Seem. And our question that we're going to focus on today is we're comparing the characteristics internally of Grakker and Madame Pong. How is Grakker different from Madame Pong? And then in the middle, how are they alike? What are some shared characteristics? So as I'm reading this chapter, really think about and focus on the internal qualities of each of these characters. Seldom Seem. I froze. I mean, wouldn't you? What is it? I asked, trying to speak without moving my jaw. What did I do? I sounded like a bad ventriloquist, but I didn't want to give Grakker any excuse to fire that ray gun. You tried to throw me to the ground, he said, sounding offended. Fortunately, the trained reflexes of a frisking fighter are more than a match for such an obvious move. I started to ask what he meant, then realized my mistake. I suppose it should have been obvious. Never shrug while carrying a trigger-happy paranoid alien on your shoulder. Maybe they should add that to those survival rules your parents teach you when you're a little kid. Now remember, Rod, don't eat soap, look both ways before you cross the street, and never annoy a temperamental alien. Can I talk? I asked in my bad ventriloquist voice, softly. I wasn't trying to throw you off. I was shrugging. It's something we Earthlings do. Do you expect me to believe that? Why don't you ask Madame Pong? I said. Isn't she supposed to know that kind of thing? Grakker thought for a second, then said, all right, we'll ask Madame Pong, but move slowly. Look, I said as I walked slowly back to the room. I'm not your enemy. I don't like the way you're treating me, but I'm not out to get you or anything. Just return to the room, said Grakker. I hoped when we got back to the room, we wouldn't find the things playing catch with the spaceship. If we did, I figured I could kiss my brain goodbye. Fortunately, Madame Pong had the situation well under control. The twins were sitting side by side, staring at her with fascination as she told them something I took to be a fairy tale from her planet. I expected Grakker to interrupt. To my surprise, he told me to be silent until she was done. Before I could figure out what was actually happening in the story, Madame Pong said, and that is how the Snabble and the Wonkus came to live happily ever after. Then she made one of her tiny bows. The things began to clap. Tell it again, demanded Thing One. I'm sorry, said Madame Pong, but like the Wonkus, I have work to do. Are you ready? She asked, turning to Grakker and me. I started to nod, but thought better of it. Yes, I said. Did you know that if you have your lips apart, you can say yes without moving anything except your throat? We left through the back door. I had Madame Pong in my front pocket, the starship under my arm, and the things and Bonehead bouncing along behind me. Grakker was still on my shoulder, pointing the ray gun at my head, despite the fact that I had assured him at least 3 times that I didn't have any intention of harming the ship. I am responsible for the safety of Ferkel, he had replied each time. Without meaning offense to you, I must do my job. After the 3rd time, I had started to shrug, but I managed to stop myself. Once we were outside, it took a few minutes to decide where to go. After all, when the ship expanded to full size, it was not going to be easy to hide. Fortunately, I had a lot of places to choose from. The land where my parents had built our house used to be part of Grandpa's farm. The house sits on a hill that slopes down to a swamp. On the far side of the swamp lies a big field surrounded by woods. Grandpa calls the field Seldom Seem. He gave it this name because the only way you can get to it is by going across the swamp, which you can only do on foot, or by making your way over a half-mile of bumpy dirt road that cuts through a neighbor's automobile junkyard. Seldom Seem is the only part of our land Grandpa still uses. Every spring he plants it it with oats or corn. About the only people who ever go back there are my family, a few hired hands, and in the fall, some hunters. I love Seldom Seem and the woods that surround it, but I think the swamp is my favorite place because it's so odd, even spooky, with its murky pools and huge old willow trees. To cross the swamp, you start on this chunk of land that is usually dry, though it gets pretty squishy in the spring and the fall, sometimes actually ending up completely underwater. Then you use the weird little bridge my father and some of his friends built back when Dad was still around. The bridge is about 6 feet wide and 20 feet long. It has no side rails and is only about 3 feet above the water. Beneath it flows a stream, the only running water in the swamp. The bridge is a great place for lying on your belly and watching what swims underneath, which is mostly nothing, though sometimes in the spring there will be a big fish. "A froggy!" cried little thing one as we started across the swamp. She loved frogs, and having spotted one, there was no way she was not going to chase it. "Stop her, bonehead!" I cried, suddenly glad I let him tag along. After all, I didn't dare chase Linda myself. Any sudden movement might make Grakker trigger happy. But if she got herself wet, I would be in big trouble with my mother. Bonehead got her back into the group without much fuss. "I like this," said Grakker as we stepped onto the bridge. "It looks like home." "Do you come from a swamp planet?" I asked, thinking of some old movies I had seen. "Do you come from a swamp planet?" he replied. I started to ask what he meant, but then I figured it out on my own. A planet is a big place, and it's pretty silly to think it will be the same from one pole to another. That should have been obvious to me, since in this little walk we were going from lawn to swamp to field and possibly to forest. "I do not come from a swamp planet," said Grakker when I didn't answer, "but on my planet I used to live in a swamp." His voice was wistful, as he was really missing his swamp. "It was a lovely place," he continued, "foggy and smelly." "How nice," I said. "Don't get all soppy, Grakker," called Madame Pong from my pocket. "We have work to do." I realized to my surprise that Grakker was snipping. "See any place big enough for the ship yet?" I asked, hauling little thing 2 away from the edge of the bridge. "Not yet," said Grakker. "Keep going." "So how is it that you two speak my language?" I asked. "Did they give you a crash course before you left?" I realized after I said that under the circumstances, crash course was a bad choice of words. "We have monitored your broadcast material for several decades now," said Madame Pong. "That material is run through a computer which analyzes your language. That analysis is used to prepare a language module, which we plug into a unit that has been surgically implanted in our brains. This module provides, within certain limitations, instant translations. If I take it out now," and here she reaches up and she pulled something from behind her ear. "Grackum speckbrickle eep eep," she said, finishing the sentence with a couple of squeaks. She replaced the module and said, "Simple, really." "Elementary," I replied. "I recognize that," said Madame Pong. "You're quoting Sherlock Holmes." "I like Sherlock Holmes." "How do you know about him?" I asked. "I told you. We have been monitoring your broadcast." "So what do you think of what you've seen?" I asked, wondering if they had picked up things like Gilligan's Island and laxative commercials. "You are a very troubled people," replied Madame Pong seriously. "We feel bad for you." Before I could figure out what, if anything, to say to this, Grakker shouted as loud as he could, considering that he was only 2 inches high, "There! That's the spot!" We had left the swamp path, crossed the edge of Seldom Seem. Grandpa had been plowing last week, so what we saw as we came out from between the scrub trees was 8 acres of soft brown soil surrounded on all sides by low-growing forest. Lots of room, no one to see. It was indeed perfect for the aliens' purpose. "Walk on a bit," said Grakker. "We need to set the ship farther from the trees before we enlarge it." "I want to carry the spaceship, Roddy," said Thing 2. "No, I want to carry it," whined Thing 1, who clearly had not had a bit of interest in carrying it until just this moment. "I have to carry it," I said firmly, before Grakker could jump into battle, "and that's that." "Strange species," said Grakker, "letting such undeveloped creatures walk around on their own." "They're fun," I said, defending the twins in spite of myself. "Strange species," repeated Grakker. "Put the ship down here, please." Following his directions, I placed the ship carefully on the ground. "Now what?" I whispered. "Now we blow it up," said Grakker, causing me to wonder if their language implants were as effective as they thought. "Move back." I took the twins by the hands and walked back until Grakker said we were safe. After a moment, a blue, crackling light surrounded the ship. "Wowee!" cried Eric as the ship began to grow. It doubled in size, then doubled again until it was nearly 10 feet across. Suddenly, the crackling light began to fizz. We heard a series of loud bangs, like a string of firecrackers going off, followed by a whining sound as the ship shrank back to its 2-foot size. "Boogers," said Grakker, which made me wonder again about his language module. "Should we go over to it?" I asked nervously. "Not yet," he said. "Let me talk to the people inside." I was about to ask about how he was going to do that when I realized he probably had some sort of radio equipment. I also wondered just how many aliens there were inside the ship. 2? A dozen? 100? This was starting to feel like a genuine invasion. He pressed a button on his collar and began to mutter. After a while, he stopped and bent his head as if listening. Mutter, mutter, listen, listen. Finally, he pressed the button again, then turned to me and said, "We'll have to go back to your room. Something is wrong with the enlarging device, and we have to repair it. It looks as if we're going to be your guest for a while." "What Grakker means," said Madame Pong, "is we would appreciate it if you would extend us your hospitality until we are able to repair our ship." "What I mean," said Grakker, "is that he takes us back to the house and finds a safe place for us, or I arrest him for obstructing interplanetary justice." Okay, so for that chapter 3, Seldom Seem, I asked you to think about Grakker and Madame Pong, and I wanted you to compare how alike and different they are, their internal characteristics. So you can write that down. You can draw a very similar chart like this on a sheet of notebook paper, and then take a picture, and you can send it through Class Dojo to me. You can also do a Venn diagram, or you can do a double bubble map that we've done before. Thank you, guys.